Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. My name is Viktor Neustroev, and today the topic of our webinar is positional pawn sacrifice. Okay, please let me know if you can see me and the board actually, and please let me know about the sound because last time there was a problem with the sound. Is everything okay? It's all good. Okay, so perfect. By the way, guys, where are you from? And are you able to participate in OTB tournaments in your country? Because in Russia, yes, some tournaments are conducted, especially, for example, Novosibirsk Region Championship. Um, However, of course, everyone there is in mask, and it's difficult to play, but they play. This is what they can. Of course, there is always a social distance between people, so it's really hard to play in these conditions. But everyone, I mean, many people like chess, so that's why they want to play. Okay, no tournaments in India, unfortunately. Okay, only online tournaments. Okay. Okay, so looks like now only some championships are conducted here in Russia, but no opens, no public events. Okay, so fine. I see. Actually, guys, do you remember that today is the last day of our chess tournament? This is our educational chess group on chess.com. So this is the link. So there was around 7. Here it is. So you see here, there was a leader. It was Shreya Rivankar. She won all her games, and actually, as I know, she won the game against Vitaly Kalugin and scored 7 of 7. So that's why she is the winner. However, we still don't know who will be the second one. There are several games that should show us who will be the second and the third place. But of course, tomorrow morning I'll analyze every game with my anti-cheating tools. Okay, fine. So actually, don't forget to join this group. This is very important. Sometimes I publish educational events, educational records, game analysis, and for example, I'm making a live stream on YouTube, and if you want to watch it, you can always find it in our group. So you see live webinar. If you click on it, you'll see this YouTube stream, and actually you can subscribe to my YouTube channel. And yes, Alice is my daughter. So she didn't play actually well. Some of her games were really good, but no, she's not enough strong to no, to be one of the top players of this tournament. Okay, so for those who attend our webinar for the first time, I also recommend you to send me a friend request on chess.com. If so, you won't miss any notifications, announcement about the future webinars. And for people so who are interested in chess stories, I'll publish the story about the tournament that I had 2 years ago. I played it in Tunisia. So this is where I explain how it happens and also provide you with the analysis of 2 good games that I played. So this is the analysis. After the webinar, you will be redirected. my website. You can read this. I think this is a really interesting article. So with PGN analysis provided. Okay, fine. Now let me close it. Fine. So what we are going to do today? Today we are going to talk about positional pawn sacrifices. You remember we had a webinar that was devoted to dynamic pawn sacrifice. And when we are talking about dynamic pawn sacrifice, we intend to sacrifice something, for example, a pawn, and then we are trying to calculate the lines to be sure that we get the initiative or maybe have a strong attack on the enemy king, or at least gain a pawn back, or something that is even more important than a pawn a little bit later. So we have to calculate several lines to be sure that we didn't lose the pawn for free. Okay, so okay, there is a question from Edward. Edward, who are you talking about by saying them? Okay, fine. So when it comes to okay, when it comes to positional pawn sacrifice, it's more important to evaluate the position properly when you decide to sacrifice. So for example, you sacrifice a pawn, then you have to no, this is what usually I am doing when I am deciding what if I want to sacrifice the pawn. I calculate the line and try to calculate maybe 7 to 10 moves, several lines that consist of 7 or 10 moves, and try to evaluate the position after that. If I see that my opponent doesn't have a clear solution how to simplify the position and improve his position and even solve his problems there, then this positional sacrifice could make sense. However, more important is to evaluate it. Why do we sacrifice pawns positionally? We have several purposes of such a pawn sacrifice. So the most important and the most popular one is when we want to restrict enemy pieces, especially lock out enemy pieces. Bishops, knights, maybe rooks sometimes. Another reason is just to improve our pieces. For example, open the diagonal for our bishop. Yeah, so gain more space might work as well because space is important. And AlphaZero proved it successfully in the games that AlphaZero played against other engines. Um, this program uh, even sacrificed pawns to get more position, to get more space advantage. Fine. Sometimes we sacrifice to make enemy pieces worse or just break the interaction between them. And of course, another popular way to sacrifice the pawn positionally is just to ruin the pawn structure of your opponent. However, then I would say it's closer to dynamic pawn sacrifice because when you ruin the enemy pawns, of course, you keep in mind that later you're going to attack them and maybe you'll win one of the pawns back, while other will be still the objects of the attack. Okay, fine. So we are starting with this game. We're starting with this game, the game between Isaac Bolislavsky and Mikhail Tal. And actually, in this game, Mikhail Tal was playing with black pieces. And looking forward, I can say that he lost the game. Yeah, okay. The question is how to play in this position for white. Okay, let me load the notation. So, and you, of course, might suggest the moves that white can play in this position. Okay, so hi to everyone who watches my webinar on YouTube and on Instagram. So if you have any questions, you can ask them, of course. If for some reason if I didn't answer your question, you can always message me by email at tricksofchess at gmail.com. So knight f5 is a kind of a logical move in this position, because if g takes f5, g takes f5, there is a discovery check. So this bishop is hanging, and of course it opens the position. But you guys should understand that in case if you play knight f5, g takes f5 is not obligatory. For example, he can play just g5, and then the position is closed on the king side. So f4 cannot be played, and I have no ideas how to succeed here. Of course, knight can capture on e7, and this is how white gets the advantage of a bishop pair. But I don't know. I have no ideas how to find a winning plan there. No, I can maybe find a few moves more, but looks like we can succeed on this kingside attack. So that's why I don't like. Yeah, so the bishops are bad, and I can't find a way how to improve them. That's why knight f5 is maybe not the best choice. What else do you suggest here? So there was a good question from a spectator who watches our webinar on Instagram about the openings. So while you're thinking, I'll just spend a few minutes talking about openings. If you are beginners, I recommend you to play open positions. So like e4 openings mainly, because there you have to calculate lines, and the ability to calculate properly is the best thing that helps you to improve when you are just a beginner. Also, opposite castled positions are really good. So try to castle to the opposite side and advance your pawns on the enemy king to attack him. Fine. So here g5. That's right. G5 was played in the game. And what do you think is the best solution for black? To accept this pawn sacrifice or to play something else? f5. I'm not sure about f5. f5 shouldn't work. E takes f5, then g takes f5, then knight f5, I believe. There is a bishop on c2. So guys, looks like f5 just blunders the pawn. So rook f8, king f7 is not a good move here. I doubt that such a strange move would work. I would say king h8 instead. So here either take or play, yeah, or play king h8 actually. King h8 was played in the game, but so f takes g5. I think this move deserves attention. Here, Sharia suggests to play knight g4. What can we say about this move? So knight c4, black can play knight c4. I don't think knight c4 is good here. Knight c4, b3, for example. No, not knight c4. What do you think black can do? Just bishop d6? Bishop d6 cannot be played. The knight is quite dangerous here. Knight f6 fork, in case if the bishop comes to d6. Ah, okay. So here knight c4. No, it doesn't work because of knight f5 here. This is quite good, because now if g takes, and we deliver a checkmate. So if he takes here, then knight e7, and finally bishop g5 gaining the exchange. So knight c4 is a bad move. No, it shouldn't be played. Um, so g5, f takes g5 was the best move actually, but after knight g4, the best continuation is just to trade the bishop for a knight, like Edward suggested. Queen g4. What can you say? So, for example, h6. And then I don't know how to deal with this bishop pair. So, because we lost a pawn, he's about to play king g7 or king h7, something like that, but we can't open the position to attack the king. And if, for example, he trades the queens off, then black is better. So I don't like knight g4. What about queen e5? What can you say about this move? We gained the pawn back, but who is better? So what black should do, and no, if only white can open his bishops, I would say white is better. Yeah, but the problem is that here just queen d6. We have to trade the queens. Bishop d6. Let's say rook d1, bishop f4, g3. Trade the rooks, then bishop comes to e5. And I would say the position is approximately equal. There are double pawns on the g file, but at the same time, white can't advance his e-pawn, and his bishops are still restricted. Maybe it makes sense to trade them with bishop g4 or knight g4, but e4 will be a weakness then. Okay, so there is a good question from DJ, and he asks about not in this position, so let's assume the pawn is here, about h4 h5 sacrifices that weakens the enemy king's position in case if we are castle to the same side. Yes, it's a very common practice, especially if you have bishop and queen on this diagonal and threatening with a checkmate on h7. You can play h4 h6. Sometimes you can even sacrifice your knight on g6 to be able to continue the attack with the king, even if you don't see that there is a concrete solution or a variation where you checkmate, gain the material, start a strong attack. h4 h5 still can be a helpful move. Maybe later in the game you can use the advantage of his weakness on g6. So it depends. Okay, another good question. When in the end games, when we play to create a second weakness, so probably when we sacrifice a pawn to create a second weakness on the other side of the board, can it be called a positional pawn sacrifice? It depends. Positional pawn sacrifice mainly happens in the middle game. As for the end game, yes, sometimes it helps. So the difference is that when you talking about dynamic pawn sacrifice, you are able to calculate the line and understand that this sacrifice makes sense. So you gain the material back, or you create some real problems. When you sacrifice the pawn positionally, you just keep in mind that yes, it improves my position, it ruins his pawn structure, and potentially in future I can use it. So that's the difference. So it depends on the position, and yeah, we can call it a positional pawn sacrifice or dynamic pawn sacrifice. Okay, fine. So yeah, g5, f takes g5 was the best option, of course. And then I would say b3 is the best move. b3 to restrict the knight activity. e5 you're playing here, I would play b3 right here. But then g5 can be played, and I understand why Isaac Bolislavsky played g5 first, and after f takes g5, he of course wanted to play b3. then bishop f6, and here white can apply the idea that happened in the game. So I don't want to show you in this variation because this happened in the game. However, here king h8 was played. G takes f6. No. First b3, of course. Rook f8. Then there was a positional pawn sacrifice. So they didn't take the g5 pawn. And we can play knight d5. What for? This is a positional pawn sacrifice. Okay, who can tell me what's the idea of knight d5? Why we sacrifice the pawn there? Okay, actually, this position is taken from Rui Lopez opening. So they started with Rui Lopez. So for people who are thinking about what to start with, what opening to play, Rui Lopez or Italian game, it depends on your style. I know that Rui Lopez requires knowledge. If you don't know the lines, you'd better play Italian game. If you prefer sharp positions, I would say maybe Evans Gambit is a better solution for you. Okay, so right, the main idea is that the main idea was mentioned by Marcel to open lines for bishops, especially for light squared bishops. So this is a typical positional pawn sacrifice for Rui Lopez because this bishop is a kind of a bad bishop. The only thing the bishop does is supporting the pawn on e4. However, there is no knight on f6 attacking this pawn. That's why no support needed. So it makes sense to open the bishop. Moreover, it's not a full pawn sacrifice. We get the bishop for a knight. And of course, we know that bishops are better for knights. Okay, let's see what happens. Bishop d5. E takes d5. Here, rook d5, of course, cannot be played. We just play bishop e4. That's why he captured with the queen. G takes f6. Bishop takes f6. Bishop h6. Rook f e8. This is what was played in the game. However, it doesn't really matter. We play bishop e4. Queen comes to e6, queen f3. What can I say in this position? So yes, white is down a pawn, but we got two achievements. So first, we improve the bishop. That is the best minor piece in this position. The second one is that we totally restricted the knight activity on a5. And maybe we can even consider the third kind of advantage. It's the advantage of having a bishop pair. But at the same time, there is no concrete winning plan. There is no strong attack on the enemy king. However, e5 is a weakness. And at the same time, we see that we successfully block enemy pawns. And right now, or even after 7 to 10 moves, he can't exploit the advantage of having one extra pawn. So we have a full compensation for that, more than a full compensation. Queen e7, rook a d1. Bishop g7 first, bishop a3. So we keep a bishop pair, and c5 is a weakness. So he can get rid of this weakness by playing c4 because of b4. Rook f8. Queen h3. King g8. So this is what was played in the game. Here we may repeat the position by giving check and moving the bishop back to e4. But white is playing for victory. He plays queen g4. Bishop f6. Who can tell me what's the idea of bishop g4 move? Open the H file. What for? G3 king G2 rook H1. But you can play G3 king G2 with the queen on H3. Why to move it to G4? So William thinks that it's to guard the D1 rook. And I almost agree with you. It's not to guard the rook on D1, but to guard the D1 square. I'll show you. Bishop f6, rook d8, and then offer another trade. So, for example, well, here it was played. Knight b7. If he takes on d1 with his rook, then queen d1, then queen comes to d5. c5 is a weakness, so I think we are able to gain pawn back. So moreover, knight b7 here doesn't work because queen d5 is a check and the fork at the same time. So he didn't take. He decided first to get his knight back, because even if we trade all the pieces off, then this endgame with a bishop pair against two other pieces, keeping in mind that the knight on a5 is almost trapped, is definitely in white favor. So yeah, in general, now if it's possible to trade a knight for a bishop, then black would love to do it, but no, I would say that bishop pair is quite strong, and in the endgame, a bishop pair can even compensate a pawn loss. So if you guys are subscribed to my YouTube channel, I think I published my game that I played against Volodar Murzin, who is a Russian wonderkind. Now he's a strong international master. When I was playing the game against him, he was a FIDE master with his FIDE rating something like 2450 or 2445, something like that. And I was playing the game with black pieces, but was able successfully to outplay him, giving him no chance at all. And finally, in the end game, I had a bishop pair, but I was already one pawn up. So I traded. No, actually, I applied another tactical strike and gained another pawn. So, but from there, my bishops were so powerful. So even without a pawn, I could make a draw with no problems. But I had extra pawn and won that game. So knight b7 played. How to play? What do you think? c4. What's the idea of c4 move? c4, b4. What else? So today we are going to observe two games. This is the first one, then there will be another game, and then two examples. Okay, so c4 to fix the c5 weakness. That makes sense. That makes sense, but yeah, actually c4 also helps us to get the control over d5. Okay, fine, that's true. If we are playing for a draw, then we can play this move. However, this is where white has a concrete solution. Yes, we can take this knight with a bishop. So here we convert our advantage of having a bishop pair into something that is more material. We are able to get the pawn back, and at the same time keep our positional advantage because of the activity of our pieces. So for example, if rook d1, queen takes d1, queen b7. Here we could play queen d6. He plays king f7. This is the main line. Oh, wait a sec, this is the main line. Yeah, this is what could happen. This is what happened in the game, actually. But if, for example, here, not rook d1, but queen takes b7, then first we play this move, queen e6. He plays king g7, then we trade. Bishop takes on d8, queen e5, and we gain another pawn. If, for example, he plays queen f7, what do you think we can do? How to get enough advantage here to win the game? Rook takes, then bishop takes. Liquidate everything and then take on c5. No, it's not enough. Then the number of pawns will be equal, and I'm not sure that this endgame is winning for white. What? Queen c8. So yeah, take on d8 first, bishop d8, but then not queen c8, but either queen e5 or queen e6. I like queen e6 more because this move allows us to create a distant passed pawn. Of course, we are not going to play a4 right now, but we want to capture one of these pieces, and at the same time keep in mind the idea to play queen c8. The best move for black in this position is queen d7. He offers a perpetual check with queen d1, queen h5. So we can't capture on c5 because of it, but we can play king h2. And of course, if he does queen d1, then queen e6. Then take on e5 with a check. So white is better in this position. Now what happened in the game? Game he took on d1 first, queen takes d1, queen b7, queen d6. So attacking his bishop and one pawn. What could he do in this position? He could play queen e7, but I don't think it's a good move. If so, we play queen a6 and attacking the b5 pawn. If b4, then check and we take the pawn on c5. If he tries something like that, no, he can't play this move. f6 is hanging, sorry. So bishop c5 was played in the game, and here white successfully gained the pawn back, but kept his positional advantage. So I think we don't need to analyze what happened in the game. At least you understand the idea of a positional pawn sacrifice that was demonstrated here. However, I'm quickly show you what happened. H5, C4. So the idea is to create the passed pawn on C file. Check. He goes here. The pawn on A2 isn't hanging because of the king weakness. So he goes to B7 back. Bishop E3, E4, and C5. So bishop E7 is not a big problem. Queen B6 offering a trade. This in game is. I'll show you. The in game is absolutely losing. With bishop d6 in this position. For example, king h3, e4 is a weakness, while b6 is a passed pawn, and protected passed pawn in case if you play a4, a5. So queen d5, c6, bishop g3. Yeah, his pieces activity and the idea to give a perpetual check can only save black position here. h4, c7, h takes g3. He doesn't take, because if he takes, then queen a2 or queen h5. Queen h5, and it's gonna be a draw. But king g2, queen d1, queen takes d6. Now queen f3 is not a perpetual check, because if such a move is played, then king f1 and king escapes to e2, then to d2. So queen d6, queen takes d6, c8 equals queen, extra piece for a few pawns. Then they were keeping playing. They made several moves, and finally, so you see, we cannot trade the queens. In such a case, it's gonna be a draw because of a8 square is of the opposite color than the bishop that we have. So if we get rid of the queens, it's gonna be a draw. And this is what Mikhail Tal understood, of course. That's why he decided to play with bishop. Hey, wait a sec. Is it a... Is this... no, if queen b3, it's fine. A takes b3, it's not the edge pawn. That's why white is winning. So here, if queen takes c5, king takes c5, king goes to c8, then this move, and the idea that is he cannot get to the corner. That's why white is winning here. So finally, black resigned because it's almost over. So we can keep checking him and maybe deliver a checkmate or just promote the pawn. Okay, fine. Okay, we finished the analysis. So let's just look at this position again. So g5 was one pawn sacrifice that wasn't accepted, but the other one was knight d5. And knight d5 is a typical pawn sacrifice for Rui Lopez, because then we were able to block his e-pawn with our bishop. At the same time, we did several things. We kept his pieces bad. For example, the bishop on f6 was bad. The knight on a5 was absolutely restricted here. What then? We got a bishop pair. Yes, and of course we activated our light squared bishop. Okay, fine. I'm closing it. Okay, and I'm going to open the other one. This is the game between Wolfgang Ullmann and Efim Geller. So we are going to analyze the flag. d4, knight f6, c4, g6, knight c3, bishop g7, e4, d5, bishop e2. So people typically play knight f3 in this position, and it's just the main line of King's Indian. So I think everyone knows it. Bishop g5 is not a typical move, and one of the best continuations after bishop g5 is c5. So the idea is to open the bishop. d5, h6, bishop f4, a6. And here he plays queen d2. What if instead of queen d2 he plays knight f3? What do you think white black can do in this position? What was the idea? Okay, what Kasparov knight maneuver? Okay. What else can you suggest? Okay, Anirudh, if you play reverse London system against King's Indian, reversed? No, okay, we'll discuss it tomorrow when we have a lesson. I can't answer your. No, I don't know what it is. I can't. I don't have any ideas right now about reverse London system because I don't understand what do you mean. So either d5 is 66 or what? Okay, so here b5 is a nice pawn sacrifice like that you mentioned. So for example, c takes b5, a takes b5, and this is how we get more space on that side. But of course, this move has a concrete solution. If, for example, knight b5, knight e4, well, it's a good pawn trade because e4 is a central pawn. If bishop takes, then queen e5, not queen e5, then wait, how to play? How would you play in this position in case of bishop takes b5? Bishop a6? I think there is a better way to play. Okay, so okay, Marcel is correct. Yeah, it's knight e4. Knight e4, knight takes e4, and then queen e5. Taking the bishop. He has to go back, but then bishop c3, b takes c3, and queen takes b5. If he wants, he can take on h6, but after rook e8, looks like our position is slightly better. Let's say here we are actually down a pawn, but it's not a big problem. For example, if he does this move, then we can trade, activate the bishop, and then either take on a2 or on d5. So here we are able to gain a pawn back. So that's why he played queen d2 to stop queen e5 coming. Also, the h6 pawn was hanging, so that's why the next move was king to h7. Knight f3 and b5 anyway. That was a positional pawn sacrifice here. C takes b5, a takes b5. Oh, knight b5 doesn't work. The e4 pawn is hanging. That's why he takes with the bishop. What was the idea of this sacrifice? So how to play after bishop b5? What do you think? Knight e4 no longer works. No, please suggest your moves. Bishop d7. Bishop d7 to trade the bishops. I think you'd better play bishop a6 if you want to trade the bishops. What's the idea of bishop d7? Bishop a6? Okay. This is what I said, bishop a6. But no, it's a different move. So still queen a5. Queen a5 is not so strong. It can be played, but it's not the best move because he can just go back with his bishop to d3, for example. Okay, so nobody knows. Okay, Marcel, knight h5. What for? Just to open up the bishop? Maybe, maybe. But bishop e3? No, it's queen b6 move. So the idea is to get the control over these two files and attack enemy pawns. So if we are able to get one pawn back, then of course we'll get a better position. So bishop e2 was played here. However, what if a4, for example? What do you think black can do after a4? What's the idea of knight e4? Knight e4 and then knight takes knight. Okay, queen takes b5, so we sacrifice the queen. A takes b5, and finally we take on a1. And the only thing he can do, I'll show you actually. Knight e4, knight e4, queen b5, a takes b5, rook takes. And here he should play queen c1 to block it. Or another move is king e2. But if so, then these two rooks, no, because of well, no, we had a lesson that was we had a webinar that was devoted to how to play with a queen against two rooks and with two rooks versus queen. So, and from there you may remember that it's quite important when the king is quite safe. If so, two rooks can be better than a queen, like it is in this position. So black king is located perfectly, while white can be the object of the attack. So moreover, here black also has a bishop pair. If queen c1, then no, not king e2, but if queen c1, rook c1, bishop c1, then maybe just bishop d7. And if we calculate the number of pawns, it's equal, while b6 and b2 pawns, no, b6 and b2 are the objects of the attack. So that's why a4 wasn't played. Instead, bishop e2. No, not queen e2, bishop e2. Queen b4 to put the pressure on e4 pawn. e5. Knight h5, attacking the bishop, so the bishop is now hanging. Bishop g3. How would you continue in this position? So we sacrifice the pawn, but there is no clear solution how to gain the pawn back or convert our initiative to something more material. We can take on g3 and get a bishop pair, but I think it's too early while the rook is on the h file. Okay, for those who just joined our webinar, we are talking about positional pawn sacrifice. So I'm explaining the examples happened in Grandmasters games when they sacrificed a pawn to get the positional advantage. So now we are looking, now we're analyzing the game between such grandmasters, Wolfgang Ullmann and Efim Geller. The game was played, okay, I don't remember which year exactly, but it happened in Palma de Mallorca. And by the way, I've been there once. Okay, rook e8. What's the idea of rook e8? That makes sense, of course, but wait, you expect white to open the e file. However, I'm not sure that this is gonna happen. What about e6? So you okay, guys. So your problem in this position is that you are thinking about the concrete solution that helps you to get some counterplay, and that's why you want to open the files to activate the rook, maybe to put the pressure on the bishop on e2, maybe somehow attack the king through the e file. But no, here the move that was played is bishop a6. So we trade our bishop that was not developed because we want successfully attack the a and b files. So bishop a6, rook a6. You see, now these pawns are the objects of the attack. E takes d6, e takes d6. So the other thing that we did, we protected the d6 pawn. Castle, knight d7. Just to develop the knight, he played rook a to e1. And now it's time to take on g3. So there is nothing to worry about. There is no rook on the h file. Our king is quite safe. And no, there is no concrete solution, but we keep playing positionally. Knight b6. Okay, let's go back. Okay, there was a question: why trade a good bishop? Wait, why do you think this bishop is good? I think our light squared bishop and white light squared bishop are approximately equal. By trading this bishop, we just get more space for our pieces. Because there is no bishop, so it means that this rook can now join the queen side fast. That's the idea. Okay, so knight b6 was played, rook e2, knight c4, queen d3, and rook f8. So here we keep in mind knight b2 idea, after which after what this knight is hanging on c3, then maybe the a2 pawn dies, and white had to play b3. So he sacrificed on c3 with the idea to take on c4. Queen c3, queen takes c3, bishop takes on c3, b takes c4, and rook a2. We gain the pawn back because of the strong attack. So you see, we were unable to calculate the line where we gain this pawn. However, this is a typical situation in this opening when b5 is played. So this kind of a pawn sacrifice always leads to a strong attack on the queen side. And of course, it's not a king attack. The king is located to the other side. It's a attack on pawn weaknesses. And it's very common when black takes one of these pawns and equalize the position materially. While positionally, because of pieces activity, black is still better. Okay, as for here, I think there is no big difference between h takes g3 and f takes g3. So rook a2, the bishop is much better than this knight here, and our rook is more active than the rook on f1. So rook c1, bishop f6. And in this position, there was a good move for white that he could play, and maybe this move could offer a really good chances for white to make a draw in this position. What do you think this move was? So, okay, so you suggest g4. Why g4? What the g4 does? G3 and king. Okay, so the idea of g4 is to stop our activity g5, g4. So yeah, g4. This is how it stops our h5 move. In the game, king f1 was played instead, and we played h5. So now g4 cannot be played. Knight e1, g5. It allows our king to get more space. Rook c2, rook a1, king e2. Now king g6, king f5. So this black king is on the 5th rank, while white can only get to the 3rd rank. Knight d2, g4. So bishop can join from g5. So knight f1, bishop d4. If, for example, in this position he plays knight e3, should we trade or not? What do you think? King e4 you suggest, because you think our bishop is better? I think the most simple way is to take, because this is how we can get the material. So, for example, if king, then we can play rook a3, king a2, and king e4. Right. And then our king comes to d4. We are able to take the c4 pawn. If, for example, he takes with the f pawn, then still king e4 works, and rook a3 then. He loses one pawn, maybe even several pawns more. So, of course, this move wasn't played. He gets back to d2, rook g1, knight b3, bishop f5, and finally we took the pawn, king f1, rook h2, king g1, rook h3. So it's not trapped. Knight f1, and of course, by playing h4, we just open the position. So now we are about to take the pawn on c4, and that's why white resigned in this position. If he tries to attack on g4, we can always play f5, while c4 is a weakness that can be attacked twice with our rook and king, of course. Oh, we already have extra pawn, and we may get the second one. The game is over. Okay, fine. So let's go back. If, for example, you like to play King's Indian, keep in mind the idea of c5, and if d5, a6, and b5, you just sacrifice the pawn there, but get strong positional advantage. Actually, this is what I taught one of my students to play, Eric from Florida. And he successfully played this strategy against his friend. But the bishop was not on e4, it was on g5. And we decided to play it immediately with king on g8 and knight the pawn on h7. So c5, knight f3. Yes, but it's gonna be if c takes d4, for example, which is quite a common move here, then knight d4, and it's no longer King's Indian, it's dragon variation. And bishop d5 is a very suspicious move in dragon. So I think queen e5 is still a good move. On maybe even something like that would work. Knight e4, knight takes e4, and then queen e5. Because if queen d2, we can trade and capture on d4. Or we can play queen e5. So no, maybe it's too early to sacrifice a piece, but maybe queen e5 right now. This is better. So this dragon variation is more in black favor. King f1 here. Then just queen e5. So you can play knight b5 maybe then. Okay, I think that in this position white is better, even if he plays queen d2. That's why I think that knight takes e4 is too early. Queen e5 should be played first. Queen e5, then just develop the pieces. Fine, okay. So we are done with this game, and now I'm going to show you two examples. Okay, it's what's going on? Sorry. Okay, something wrong happened. Just wait a sec. So actually, in this position, it's white to move. What do you think white should do? Oh, please don't forget that the topic of our today's webinar is positional pawn sacrifice. So how white can get a positional advantage here? Well, queen h5 check doesn't give anything because g6, b4. Okay, too many pieces there. b4, I don't know, knight takes b4, for example. Okay, e5 was suggested here several times. e5 and then knight e4. No, okay, so guys, what exact line do you suggest? e5, then of course black has to capture, otherwise black loses his bishop. Then f5. Bishop comes to f7. Then you play knight e4, right? For example, black castles queenside after that. How would you continue? Queen f3? What for? Queenside pawn storm? Yes, maybe. a3, b4, and so on, but it's too slow. There is a concrete move. No, okay. Okay, I'll show you. So e5, yes, you're right. F takes e5, f5, again, you're correct. Bishop comes to f7, knight e4. That's right. What, for example, here black can do? He can castle to that side. And if so, then queen g4. If with the idea to threaten f6, discovered attack, discovered check, and the idea of taking the pawn on g5, for example, h5 won't work because of queen g7, and the bishop on f7 is hanging, so that's why here the queen cannot be trapped. And don't worry, while the black queen is located on the queen side, black can't really create any troubles to our king on the g1. It's covered with our pieces. If needed, even a knight g3 can be played. So here we are able to get the pawn back, but we have the positional advantage. So maybe king b8 was a better choice, but if so, just take. And again, we can always escape with our queen, so don't worry. Maybe the advantage for white is not so big, but we have a strong f pawn, and we actually restricted this dark squared bishop activity, while all our pieces here are quite good. What else can be played? For example, he could castle to this side. That's actually a mistake, because after f6, g takes f6, knight f6, he is in real trouble. For example, something even like knight h7 can be played. If here he blocks with something, then take once, and then queen h5, the game is over. Or maybe rook f8 first. Rook f8, knight g6, knight g6, queen h5, king g8. Queen g6, queen g7. This is what I don't like. But if you play bishop d5 check, king g7, queen h6, he goes here, bishop g5, king f5, rook f1, rook f1. Yeah, this is a winning move. No, if knight f4, then bishop e6 is a mate. If king g4, still bishop e6 looks fine. Rook f5, bishop f5, checkmate. Fine. So what else can he do? Maybe knight c8 is another move that's possible in these positions. So we can play still queen g4, and if he tries to defend, then bishop g5, queen d7, and bishop h3 maybe. And we keep in mind, of course, the idea of playing f6. No, now just rook a to e1. So you see, there is no, we played 7 moves, but there is no way to get the pawn back. But of course, we all understand that white is much better in this position because of their pieces activity, more space and pressure on the enemy king. Okay, fine. Let me close it. And the second position for you, it's white to move. What do you think? What white should do? Okay, so Marcel suggests d5. Please explain your idea. Oh, okay, d5 to restrict enemy pieces. What pieces? C10, knight d4, knight d4, d5. Okay, so guys, you suggest to play d5 and then knight d4. But what if, let's say he bishop comes, bishop takes on d5. So still knight d4. Are you sure? Because then maybe he can play e6. Oh, d5 is definitely a move that deserves attention here. Okay. Okay, yeah, of course it's d5. So we sacrifice the pawn positionally. It depends on how he plays. For example, if he takes on d5 with his bishop, then after e6, if knight comes to h8, then you see two pieces. Yeah, here, let's say wait. Okay, two pieces are totally restricted. And from here, we can say that black is playing down, two pieces down. He can't really participate with these pieces, and our task is just to trade the material off and attack the queen side because he is trapped. So e6, knight d6, of course. Then knight takes d5, c takes d5, and if we want, we can capture here. But I'm not sure if we should do it immediately. Maybe knight d4 right now. If knight c4, just queen e2. So, and even this knight is pinned. We're about to play b4, 3, trade the queens. And don't worry that you lost a pawn there. The idea is that you are one piece up because the enemy bishop is not doing anything. The second thing that c takes d5 can be played as well. If so, yes, you're right about knight d4. Let's say rook ac8, then we can play several things, even just rook c1. For those who want fast play, we can take and then play rook d4 or maybe knight b5, knight d4, and then play e6 to restrict the bishop. But if I were white, I would just play an ordinary move, rook c1, just to wait, because this bishop is trapped. The knight is not doing anything on this bishop, while we have at least this bishop and two rooks to play on the queen side. Maybe here one of the best ways is to trade the queens, to play queen d3, and because then this bishop on e6 is hanging. So here strategically, white is absolutely winning. However, he's materially down a pawn. Okay, fine. So do you have any questions about positional pawn sacrifice? So don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can find the recordings of my previous webinars here on my YouTube channel. There is a playlist that is called webinars, and all webinars are there. So, and of course, don't forget me to send a friend request on chess.com. So if you have any ideas or suggestions for the topic for the next webinar, please email me, or you can send me a private message on chess.com. Okay, which type of a pawn sacrifice I prefer, positional or dynamic? I prefer dynamic because I'm good in calculations, and for me it's not so difficult to calculate the lines. However, when you play, of course, in some games I can sacrifice material positionally, but usually I prefer to calculate everything. Okay, so Benka Gambit is quite an interesting opening. However, I'm not sure that I'm going to cover it on the next webinar. I have some other ideas, but I keep it in mind. Don't worry. Okay, so positional sacrifice is more intuition. Yeah, we can say so. Because we are unable to calculate the line to the very end. That's why, yes, we should trust to our intuition. However, sometimes it's not required. If you just see certain factors that make your position better or make enemy position worse, it's okay to sacrifice. Okay, okay, there is a question. Who should, okay, what opening to choose to study for 1800 player? It depends on your style. If you prefer to play open position, so if you are good in tactics and calculations, then play e4, I would say, or any Sicilian lines are really good and full of tactics. How many hours? It depends on the person. So, for example, when I was about 1800, I I had 3 trainings per week. Each of them was 3 hours and a half. So, and of course, I also did some um, like kind of homework, analyze grandmasters games, solve puzzles on my own, and of course, participate in tournaments. Okay, Edward, it's great that you can play both tactically and positionally, because my style is, of course, tactics and calculations. So positionally, yes, I can. Some positions I really understand, but in some I can really get into trouble and just spend much time on finding a good move. However, maybe people who are not so strong as me, but are good in positional playing, they I think will be able to find a better plan in just minutes. Okay, so fine. Thank you for coming for my webinar. So if you have friends who are interested in chess, you can also invite them to the next webinar. So I just to remind you, the webinars are free. If you want to donate, you can do it. No, just message me, or you can find a link to donate on YouTube channel. Webinars for beginners, yes, I have. I think I have some. I think I conducted some webinars for beginners, but guys, looks like you are not beginners here. So if you think, or should I attract beginners? Uh, Okay, I'll think about it. Oh, actually, as for beginners, I had a in online intensive course for beginners that I conducted. You can find it on my website here, online courses. And by the way, I have some other courses that are not mentioned on my website. For example, such courses like how to play Catalan with white pieces, how to play against first move knight f3, how to play English opening for black, how to play semi-Slav for black, and of course, Can Sicilian. I'm going to so soon I'm going to publish my course how to play Poles and Sicilian, and this is what I was talking about: online intensive chess course for beginners. So this course consisted of 8 group lessons and 2 individual lessons, and of course they got much more. And actually, so people who passed this course were able to increase their rating by 200 points. So, you can send this link to them if they are interested in it, or if they want, they can contact me. It's not a problem. Okay, fine. So thank you for coming. Hope to see you on the next webinar.